ask you this. Say, take the student protests in
Yes,
America,
sir.
at universities. I have no problem instinctively with students protesting. It's actually part of the DNA of being a student, right? But I do have a problem with two things. One, the protests that happened almost immediately after October the 7th, within hours, which were clearly, deeply, deliberately inflammatory and hurtful to Jewish people. Secondly, I have a real problem with the students who were beaming direct pro-Hamas slogans onto buildings on campuses in America. You know, I'm all for free speech, and I really am. The whole show is predicated on that. But not to the point where you see Jewish students barricaded into libraries because a mob is descending on them. There is a distinction to me between people who are obviously overtly... I mean, there was a professor at Cornell University who was literally seen in public shouting how exhilarated he felt by the attacks of October the 7th. He still hasn't been fired, that guy. I think that crosses a line. Do you?
Yeah. I do not like this way. I mean, I can understand why, but I don't condone it. I would never, because you have to understand, these people, again, I'm not supporting them. I just want to make sure about two things. The reason that I started with anti-Semitism, because I wanted to make sure to clear any confusion that when I speak about Israel, I'm speaking about Israel.
Yes.
When I'm speaking about Jewish people, I'm speaking about Jewish people.
Yes.
When I speak with my Zionists, I'm speaking with my Zionists. It was very... Because
I think it was very powerful that you did that.
Yeah, I have to be careful.
That's the first thing you did, because I think it's really important.
Yeah, but at the same time, when I tell you why does that happen, it doesn't mean that I condone it. There's a difference between explanation and justification. Those people who are exhilarated, the way that they... This is the same reason why people were so happy about the interview. What do they see? They see Israel as a criminal state who is killing their people, and in the same time, they are supported by the international community and America. They have no guns, they have no superpower backing them. All they have is just a feeling of happiness, like, yes, our enemies that we cannot touch them has been hurt. All they can think about, that these are their enemies that have been hurt, right? I'm not condoning this, but again, like when people were celebrating terrorist attacks, you know, against Western targets. Of course, I don't condone that. But why? Because those people has been, from a very young age, what have they seen? They're not being heard by the media. The plight and the suffering of the brothers in Palestine, in the Arab world, are not being heard. People in Iraq, you know, like when America and Britain invaded Iraq, right? What the Arabs saw? It's like two superpowers are coming in on just regular people. So whenever there was like a bomb or like an attack on American troops, people would celebrate. Yeah, they're our enemies. Emotions are very inflammatory. And it is not right. But those people had nothing else. All they can is just like shout. All they say is like to rejoice. It is not right. Again, I'm explaining why is this happening, because it's like, yeah, if I cannot get you, I'm just going to scratch your eyes. I'm going to scratch your eyes because you've been beating me all the time, and you have the whole international community backing you up, and all I can do is scream. Is it right? No. But it is understandable. Again, it's not the right thing. But no, it's not like understandable. It's like, oh, no. But again, it is an explanation. Now, hate. And again, this is another way why this has been magnified in the media so much. What does the Western audience see? They see people rejoicing for the death of innocent civilians in Israel. This is what have the Arabs seen for years on the Arab world. For example, if you look up Sderot Cinema, this is in 2014 when Israel was bombing Gaza as usual, and the Israelis in the Sderot, the kibbutz or the settlement, they went on a hill and they had popcorn and they had drinks and they were like watching the show and they were cheering with every rocket coming down. This is what we see. Western people didn't see that.
Well, somebody found a tweet actually of mine from 2014 in which I said, at what point does what Israel is currently doing to the Palestinian people become terrorism? And because I've always said, you know, I've spoken about this a lot over the years, and I've always tried to be extremely fair-minded, albeit nobody really wants you to be fair-minded. They want you to take a side. But that was clear that my thinking back then was that they were absolutely overstepping the mark.
Absolutely. But again, to the point of rejoicing.
No, I know what you mean.
Yeah, but like if you, for example, Google the wedding of hate, This is like a Jewish wedding in Israel where they were celebrating the arsons and
No,
the
no, I've
burning
seen- I've-
of Palestinians. But
to be clear, I've seen lots of video
no, but like,
clips.
I'm not talking to you, Piers.
No, I know.
I'm talking to the Western audience
I
because
understand, but
I want to see like I want to say like this is what they see. I mean, for example, there is a very famous video for Samuel Abu Za'anin, who is like a young kid that he was shot point blank by an Israeli soldier, and he was not allowed to have any medical attention. And as his dead body was being put into the ambulance, the Jewish settlers were cheering. So for an Arab audience, this is what we see every day. So when they say, oh, we heard them back, we heard their people like they heard back, it is not right. But this is what hate does. It escalates. It feeds each other. Radicalism feeds it. It is terrible, and it is just like a vicious circle. So I would like to do something that is very interesting tonight. When I invited Jon Stewart to my show, as much of like a reception that if you see on the YouTube, people just like we had to cut the 5-minute standing ovation for broadcast. People were on their feet for 5 minutes. They could not believe it. I remember Jon Stewart telling me I could never imagine that a Jewish guy from New Jersey would have that kind of reception in Cairo. And yet, on the internet, people who would have, what? You brought a Jew on your show? Why you are with a Jew? Yes, hate is there. Yes. So. And the thing is like why we do not see each other, people in the Middle East, people in the West, that we do not put ourselves in each other's shoes. And I want to do something very interesting today. I want to give, I like telling stories. And I'm going to tell you a very nice story. This is the story, surprise, surprise, of the suffering and the plight of the Jewish people. And I want to say that because it is very interesting when you see the trauma and the suffering that the people on the other side went through, you might understand why they're coming. So this is, see this? This is a map of all of the history of the expulsion of the Jews in Europe. They've been like, I have never seen a minority being kicked around this much, right? And of course, this comes back to the, the whole idea about the original sin, that you have betrayed Jesus Christ. The blood of Jesus is on your hand. And then comes the 11th century. At that time, Jewish people were not allowed to own land. They were just peasants. Even some of the professions they were not even allowed to participate in. But they were allowed to do one thing, usury, money lending, because it was prohibited by the Catholic Church to engage into that. So what happens when you work in money? You get richer, right? And those Jews lived in ghettos. Now, ghettos was not just like isolated neighborhoods in cities. Sometimes ghettos were outside the city. This is like how isolated they were. And in those ghettos, they have to pay gold to the mayor or the governor or the prince or the noble. So they would see, you're getting richer. I need more taxes. So they pay tax. What happens when you have a business and they increase your rent? You increase your service, increase the taxes. So what happened? The Christians started to default. And suddenly, the image of the greedy Jew was created. Shylock, Merchant of Venice. If it will feed nothing else, it will feed my revenge. Like never did I see a creature I can't remember that. Never I saw like a creature that looked like a man so keen and greedy. Confound of a man. English. I messed it up. Anyways, but this was the image, greedy Jew, the greedy Jew. This was created because of their conditions, and it became worse in 1095, when Pope Urban II called for the first crusade to go and save the birth of Jesus from the unbelievers Muslim. And this crusade did not kill a single Muslim. You know how many people they killed? 2,000 Jews. Because it's like, wait, the non-believers are all over there. Why? So they went to it's called the Crusades of the Rhineland. So they went to the Jewish community because, hey, we own the money, so let's kill them better than paying them. And then came the plague. And then all of the things like, oh, they're killing babies, who would do that to a baby, And they accused them of poisoning the well. This was the kind of oppression that the Jewish people went through. Fast forward 19th century, there was like the Eastern Jew in Ukraine and Russia, and there was the Western Jews in Europe. Those people in the Eastern Jews had to immigrate because of pogroms, and they were like, kicked out. And at a certain point, the people in the West, especially in England, it's like, there are too many Jews. We need a solution. A solution for what? For the Jewish problem. So it's like we need to get rid of them. And you know what? Palestine was not even on the A list. Palestine was on the B list. Because England proposed 6,000 square miles in Uganda for the Jews in 1903. And the reason why Palestine was not on the list, that it was objected by a lot of rabbis that said, like, it's a promised land, but only when the Messiah comes. But there were other options: Argentina, South Africa, Uganda, Madagascar. And eventually they said, all right, let's do Palestine. So they went to Palestine in 1914. There was 700,000 people living in Palestine. 3% were Jewish. 1917, Balfour Declaration. Arthur Balfour, he called the Jewish people in England that they are alien and hostile race. And the thing is, the only Jewish member of the parliament, of the English parliament, Lord Montagu, he objects, like, these are British citizens. We should not kick them out. So they pushed him, but it was not going fast enough. Came the Nazis. And then it was not about the solution anymore. It was the end losing, the final solution by Hitler, because he needed an answer for the Jewish question, the Judefrage. And then, as you see, the Holocaust happened, the most orchestrated, industrialized, horrible genocide in our modern time. 6 million Jews died. So it accelerated, and they went. First of all, they left Eastern Europe, and they went to West Europe, and they went to America, and they were turned down, and they were pushed towards Palestine. So by 1948, right before the declaration of the State of Israel, there were 2 million people living there. Only 30% of them was Jews. So the whole idea of, like, a land without a people to a people without a land, it was a marketing thing. They were already Palestinians. So suddenly, from our perspective, the Jewish problem is not a Jewish problem, is not a Middle Eastern problem, is not an Arab problem. It is a European problem. It was pushed on us together with the guilt, because now we are the anti-Semite. Now we are the Jewish hater. And not just that, they took land. So people look at this like, why are we even, we had a lot of refugees coming in. And during that, there was a lot of, as you know, Zionist militia, the Aragon, the Haganah, all of these people were killing Palestinians. The famous massacre of Deir Yassin. You're talking about the atrocities of October 7th, it's horrible. But in the Arab mind, there is Deir Yassin, where there is an incredible movie called Tantoura, Tantoura, where the Israeli members of those militias, they talk about the atrocities that they did, including opening up the pregnant women's bellies and having bets if the boy inside is a boy or a girl. It is one of the most horrific, and they talk about it, some talk about with regret, and some talk about with pleasure. We did that, right? So you have even King David. I think your Prime Minister, Mr. Sunak, was there. And if I was British, I would question this. Because as you know, King David was bombed by the Aragon militias. 91 British soldiers died. I don't know, if I was British, how come my Prime Minister would have the nerve to stay in that hotel? I mean, you know, the ghost of the 91 British soldiers, that must be haunting for them. You see? So when you see all of that, and you see that suddenly, overnight, 1948, there were 1.5 million Palestinians, half of them, 3/4 of them were overnight pushed into refugees. Yeah. And this is why it's called the Nakba, the catastrophe. So now we have all of this building up into the minds. And suddenly this was like a conflict, a hate, a problem that we didn't have to do anything with. This was basically pushed on us by the Europeans. You see? So this is why it is important to say that. And I'm not saying that just like, oh, let's wipe out the State of Israel, let's like push them in the sea. No, but it's important when you talk about the conflict, that you talk about the root causes, right? No, there was like a vibrant Palestinian culture happening over there. And right now they are erasing this culture. Suddenly I'm thinking of like Israeli feta cheese, Israeli hummus. Oh, that's an insult. Israeli hummus. Come on. I mean, take the land, but leave the hummus, man. I mean, come on. I mean, that's not fair. You are someone who's always spoken against culture, cancel culture. Right now, a whole culture is cancelled.
Let me ask you this. Jonathan Friedland is a top Jewish journalist for the Guardian newspaper. He wrote a very interesting column last week in which he said, at the root of all this, you could argue you have two sets of people with just cause. And they believe passionately in their just cause. And he was sort of advising people not to take sides unless you really understand the history. Would you agree with that? Would you agree that